Welcome. The Gandhis are under the scanner of the Enforcement Directorate once again in the National Herald case, with summons being issued to the party's interim president Sonia Gandhi and MP of the party Rahul Gandhi. As expected, the summons have led to a huge political war of words, with the Congress party claiming that the investigation is nothing but political vendetta, and the same agency had closed the case in 2015. But what exactly is the case? The National Herald is a newspaper that was founded by the Congress party in 1938 and was used at that time to disseminate information on the freedom struggle. It was originally published by the AJL, or the Associated Journals Limited. The paper shut down in 2008 after a 90 crore rupee loan from the Congress failed to revive it. In 2010, the AJL was taken over by a new organization called Young India Private Limited, with Sonia Gandhi and Rahul Gandhi on the board of directors. Now, in 2012, BJP leader Subramanian Swamy filed a complaint accusing the Congress leaders of cheating and breach of trust in the acquisition of AJL by Young India Limited. The case by Swamy made the following primary allegations: that Young India Limited paid just 50 lakh rupees to acquire AJL that owed the Congress 90 crore rupees. So was the remaining 89.5 crore rupees written off? Moreover, the charge is that through this transaction, Young India Limited, on which the Gandhis are board directors, got control of valuable assets worth over 2,000 crore rupees. The backdrop to this is that the newspapers run by National Herald and AJL were granted prime properties at throwaway prices since several decades. The allegation is that these properties were now being leased out, where large commercial gains were being made. Now, here's where the probe stands. The ED has been probing AJL and the role of various Congress leaders since 2016. This was after it took cognizance of a CBI case, since it cannot act on its own. The agency alleges the accused, which includes ex-Haryana Chief Minister Bhupinder Singh Hooda and late Congress leader Motilal Vora, used proceeds of crime in the form of land illegally allotted to AJL in Haryana's Panchkula and pledged it to get a loan from a syndicate bank branch in Delhi to construct a building in Mumbai's Bandra area. This property was then valued at about 16 crore rupees and was attached by the ED in 2020. Now, to these allegations, the Congress says it's just vendetta. But before we get to the political reactions, there's been a pattern over the last few weeks actually, and we've been reporting some of this on the show and on the channel, on the number of opposition leaders who have found themselves at the receiving end of the Enforcement Directorate's action. Now, the latest among them, of course, was also Satyendra Jain, the Delhi Health Minister, and we'll just pull up some of those graphics for you. You also have a slew of Maharashtra leaders belonging to the MVA government who have been seeing probes and summons by the Enforcement Directorate in various money laundering cases. To all of these cases, the answer remains the same, that is just political vendetta. But is it a coincidence that there's so many political leaders from opposition parties who are facing the heat? That really is the big question that we are discussing today. But before that, let's take a look at the political fight that has broken out.
इस देश में इस प्रकार से अपने पपेट जैसा मेरे दोस्त ने कहा, कभी ईडी, कभी सीबीआई, कभी आईटी का दुरुपयोग करके हर राजनीतिक विरोधी को कश्मीर से कन्याकुमारी और गुजरात से पश्चिम बंगाल तक डराना, धमकाना और देश का पूरा ध्यान इधर से उधर करना, ये तकनीक अब पुरानी हो गई है।
ये तो चोरी और ऊपर से सीना जोरी जैसी बात है। अगर आपने कुछ गलत नहीं किया तो एजेंसीज को बताइए, कोर्ट में अपना पक्ष रखिए। इस प्रकार से राजनीतिक बयानबाजी करने से क्या होगा? विपक्ष का ये कहना है कि वो भ्रष्टाचार करें और उन पर कोई कार्रवाई ना हो। क्या विपक्ष में रहना भ्रष्टाचार के खिलाफ एक शील्ड है? अगर आपने अपने पद का दुरुपयोग किया है, सत्ता का दुरुपयोग किया है, तो कार्रवाई होगी।
डरेंगे नहीं, झुकेंगे नहीं, सीना ठोक कर लड़ेंगे। इस षड्यंत्र के मुखिया स्वयं प्रधानमंत्री श्री नरेंद्र मोदी हैं और उनका हथियार उनका चहेता और पालतू ईडी है। देश को गुमराह करने के लिए आए दिन मुद्दों को भटकाने की राजनीति में माहिर मोदी सरकार अब बदले की भावना में अंधी हो गई है।
The INC should not be called the Indian National Congress, but it should be called I Need Corruption, an All India Corrupt Committee. And therefore today, when a process of law is being followed to ensure that the money that has been usurped by the first family of Congress and corruption is returned to the people of India, there are people who are, instead of cooperating, crying foul about a process of law. The fact of the matter is that till yesterday, it was the Congress party itself which was saying that if we have done anything wrong, action should be taken.
So the political mudslinging and accusations aside, let us try and understand what exactly is going on. Now, we've seen a slew of cases filed by the Enforcement Directorate and other agencies where there are prominent political leaders, many of them from opposition parties, at the receiving end. The template followed is the same pretty much, where these leaders come out and say that there's no case, it's all political vendetta, and then you have the ruling party in this political fight saying that there's definitely something going wrong and these parties are corrupt, etc. But we need to understand the process. Under what framework does ED, the CBI and all of these agencies function? If there are cases which have serious misdoings or misgovernance, any kind of corruption, then when are they exactly going to come to a logical end so that this back and forth doesn't continue endlessly? There should be some finality either way. To speak more on this, I am joined today by Gopal Sankaranarayanan. He's a senior advocate, and Neeraj Kumar, former police commissioner of Delhi. Welcome to both of you, and thank you so much for speaking with us this evening on Beyond the Headline. Mr. Kumar, let me get your perspective first from and try and understand where the agencies are coming from. For long now, and this is not limited to just this government, these agencies have been accused of working as political tools, of actually going after certain cases and certain people because those in power want them to. Is there any truth to this?
Well, we cannot make a sweeping generalization. We'll have to take it case by case. I can tell you something. We should look at cases as cases against people who are in politics. Not political cases, but people against whom there are allegations, people against whom there may be adequate material. Yet, those people happen to be in politics, and more often than not, they are people who are in opposition. So they always take this plea that, well, this is a political case. I'll just give you an example. For instance, the Lalu Prasad Yadav case. When it started, Laluji kept saying it is a political matter, it is a political matter. Finally, it ended in conviction. You know it, I know it, everyone knows it. So the point of the matter is that if there is material against somebody who is a politician, he will always take this stand that the case against me has been initiated because of politics. However, there are many cases which may be purely on account of political vendetta, maybe on account of settling scores, etc., etc. So we have to distinguish between these two categories.
No, I understand that completely, sir. But my question to you is that does this happen? That, enforcement agencies are asked to go after X, Y, or Z, and then they have to go around and look for proper or possible misdoings or misdeeds?
I can just tell you from my own personal experience. I was in the CBI and I did a number of cases against so-called politicians. And in each one of them, there was material. I remember in one case, the timing of the registration and the timing of the searches and all was not quite right. I protested. I told my senior that this is not the right time to go ahead with the searches and so on, because everyone will consider it to be a political move. However, there was pressure on me and the case had to be registered and proceeded with. But the point was that even in that case, there was adequate material to proceed against that person. I remember that person met me and he said, you are doing it only for political reasons. I said, okay, let us grant it that it is for political reasons. But sir, you please tell me, is it not true that you have this property, you have this property, you have this property, you have received so much from foreign shores, etc., etc. You answer this question, the politics will come later. He had no answer. So,
may I ask who this was?
Well, I can't reveal that.
Okay. No. So, Gopalji, let me come to you on this point. So, no smoke without fire. And this is also what a lot of people believe, that if there's a case, there must be something or the other done. Now, in the previous cases and in the National Herald case, the charge is that these cases are being brought up only because of political reasons. For example, in the National Herald case, the Congress today says that the ED closed this case in 2015, and then why was it reopened? Do they have any solid foundation to make these claims?
Let me answer this in two ways. Specifically, as far as the National Herald case is concerned, I wouldn't know what material the ED has and on what basis they've issued these summons notices to Mrs. Gandhi and Mr. Gandhi. I can't comment exactly on the basis of the foundations there because I'm not privy to that material. But keeping the specificity of the National Herald case and its facts apart, I think if we step back and go back to your previous question to Mr. Kumar about the fact whether agencies are in fact used for this purpose, definitely, in my view, agencies of the union government, whether they have the legal power or not, have been utilized for many, many years. The CBI was the main weapon for many years, even in the hands of the previous dispensation. And we noticed how cases would be suddenly registered at convenient times against people who have just left at that point of time the Congress party, or people who have likely to join an opposition party, having these cases foisted against them. I am not commenting on the merits of the case. Please remember that the Association of Domestic Reforms has come out with reports every 5 years commenting on the nature of our public representatives, and shown that in the latest report, as far as the Lok Sabha, which is presently in place, we know that nearly 45%, between 45 and 50% of our members of parliament have serious criminal cases against them.
Right.
So we have seen the gradual reduction of the moral authority that these individuals have. And I agree with Mr. Kumar, there's possibly a lot of merit in the material that you can produce. The question isn't about the merits of the cases. The question really is about the way the agencies are utilized at convenient points of time to push a political agenda. Not only the CBI, now we have the ED, we have the Serious Fraud Investigation Unit Office, we have the Enforcement Directorate. The reason why in the late 90s the Chief Justice Verma led bench, when looking at the Jain diaries, decided to insulate the CBI and directed the setting up of the Central Vigilance Commission with an independent appointing process, was so that in corruption cases the CBI would report to them. But in non-corruption cases, the CBI, which is meant to be an independent agency, reports still to the central government. The ED reports to the Ministry of Finance. So each of these agencies are reporting to central government, which has IAS officers who have to work based on the directions of their ministers.
Yeah.
So how independent are these agencies? About 3 years ago, I'm sorry, I'll just complete. About
Yes.
3 years ago, the Supreme Court said in cases against politicians, you have to complete them in 1 year. That's just not been happening because these politicians will engage lawyers and drag these cases out. So many of these politicians who are crying hoarse have themselves to blame because at every stage they have tried to stymie the investigation and then the trial.
No, but just to follow up there, Mr. Gopal, whether you're a politician or not, you have a right to legal representation, isn't it? So when you say that it's the politicians who are
right to legal
extending the
representation
cases,
is not what I'm talking.
they will follow the legal process like anyone else who has been accused of a crime.
Very well, in which case, I don't think they should be complaining about the fact that the case has been dragging on for years because they are responsible for dragging it on for years.
Okay. Just another aspect we should bring to this is conviction rates. Now, I'm quoting the answer to a Lok Sabha question in March 2022 on the number of convictions under the PMLA specifically. So this is between 2005 and 2022. The number of searches conducted were 3,086. Number of ECIRs recorded close to 5,000. Number of convictions was 23. Now here I come to you, Mr. Kumar. Why such few convictions? You spoke a little while earlier about how it would be unfair to make a vast generalization that all of these cases, are just cooked up or political vendetta. There is definitely a lot that investigative agencies usually have when they pursue them. Why do they result in such few convictions? You talked about Lalu Prasad. I'm sure you would agree, sir, that is more of an exception than the rule.
Maybe so. See, a case ending in acquittal or a case ending in discharge, there can be hundreds of reasons. It can be, the reason can be that the witnesses didn't turn up. The reasons can be that, for instance, I did a case against an income tax officer. He, got the finance minister who had given the sanction for prosecution to file an affidavit to say that he did not apply his mind before giving the sanction order. Can you imagine that? So, the sanction order was held null and void, and therefore the case is still lying in abeyance. We have to now get a fresh order, a fresh sanction order to proceed in the case. So that doesn't mean that the case has ended in acquittal. So there can be hundreds of reasons why cases end in acquittal, and they are not necessarily because the material against them was weak. How well the matter was prosecuted in a court of law, how good were the prosecutors. It's an open secret that most of the people who appear from the government side are no match to the people that the defense puts up in courts of law. The best of lawyers appear from the side of the accused or the respondents. So usually the cases end in acquittal. So do not for a moment, unless we go into each and every case and make a deep analysis why those cases ended in acquittal, we cannot jump to this conclusion that it was on account of lack of material to begin with. That is not the case.
Would you want to comment on that, Mr. Gopal? The question of low conviction rates, and is it because the accused...
I just wanted to supplement.
Yes, just let me finish, sir. Is it because the accused can maybe afford the star lawyers or have the star lawyers on board?
Well, let me just go back to that number that you put out. You said there were 24 convictions. 23. It wasn't a percentage, was it? It was 24. 23. Yes. It wasn't a percentage. It didn't say 23% of cases.
No, it wasn't a percentage. It was an absolute number.
Yeah, so I'll tell you, because if you look at the NCRB data, which is put out, and even the website right now shows data up to 2020. If you look at, say, corruption cases, the national average for corruption cases convictions is about 44 to 48%. That means nearly half the cases end in conviction. Now, remember that the ED's trials which happen are based on the proceeds of an existing crime. The ED doesn't proceed in a vacuum. The ED proceeds only once there is already a registered FIR dealing with any of the scheduled offences which are there in the Prevention of Money Laundering Act. So many of those cases have joint trials where the special court will hear the case which is the main case for corruption or any other offences, maybe income tax avoidance, whatever else it is, and then decide on that, come to a conviction on that, and then you decide on the quantum of the proceeds of crime and see whether you can stick that on that person under PMLA. Therefore, the trials take a long time. The convictions that you have, 23 or so under PMLA, may seem like a modest number, but I'm not sure what it is percentage-wise. I do agree that quality of lawyering is one of the many factors that may go into it. I have worked on behalf of the CBI and ED in the 2G case, and I've seen the myriad ways in which there could be methods to try and interfere with the investigation. Legal advisors will deliberately give advice which goes contrary to what the investigators are telling them to do. Rest assured that a majority of the police are doing a fantastic job if they're left to themselves and if they're insulated from political interference. But if they are not, and that is the case, unfortunately, despite the Prakash Singh directives of 2006, the police have not been insulated. So therefore, they have, breathing down their necks, legal advisors, people who are representatives of the government in the secretaries and the ministries. We have law officers of the central government, all of whom put advice down contrary to what the investigators want. Much of that stymies the investigations themselves. So finally, when it's presented for trial, you have a complete disarray of evidence which even the most neutral judge can't do anything about.
You know, that's actually an interesting insight into what really is going on. My broad point over here is that if the police or investigative agencies are not allowed to work without direction which may come from a political quarter, will they not eventually, or are they not already, losing their credibility? And how can we ensure a speedy conclusion of these cases to at least some extent? They can't drag on for 10, 15 plus years because it's neither here nor there. Then nobody anymore knows if that person has committed a crime or not. It's just about positioning and political spin. I'm going to take that question first to Mr. Neeraj Kumar. Don't you think that the biggest harm at the end of the day is to the credibility of these agencies?
Absolutely. I mean, the credibility is down in the dumps, not only because of the faults of the agencies themselves, but because of various other reasons, and one of them is, the way the trials proceed. Just, on a lighter note, today I got a summon of a case of 2007. This was a case when I was Director General of Home Guards in the Delhi government in year 2007, and I must have given a sanction for prosecution against one of the employees of my organization. And that case is coming up after 15 years in the Rouse Avenue court day after. And I have to go and testify that, well, the signature that I have put on the sanction order is my signature, and I'm bound to be cross-examined by the defense, saying that, did you apply your mind? Do you remember the facts of the case? Now tell me, how am I to remember a case for which I gave sanction in 2007? And the case is coming up in 2022. So this is the state of affairs of our criminal justice system. You cannot, and now if the case fails, it is a CBI case. CBI case against somebody from the Delhi Home Guards. Now, if the CBI, the case fails, well, CBI will be put to blame that, look, this case has ended in acquittal. But look at the way the cases proceed in the court. We have to do something about the way the trials are handled in courts.
Do you think that's where the problem is, Mr. Gopal? And your point, your answer to the point of A, the credibility of the institutions completely wrecked with these long delays and the insinuations that they're acting on political command. And secondly, no closure, really. This will just go on and on, isn't it?
No, of course. I mean, and the people who benefit from it taking so many years, people like Lalu Prasad Yadav, today stands convicted as a criminal. That man stood in as chief minister multiple times, was the union minister for railways. He should never have held any of those offices if any of this is true. But what difference does it make? He held it, he profited, and now he's in jail for his past crimes. So I completely agree with Mr. Kumar. Our criminal justice system is in shambles, but it's in shambles from the get-go. From the very first investigator who is seized of the offense and how he collects evidence, the kind of witnesses that he gets together, the kind of testimonies that he gets, and whether those witnesses are reliable or not, all the way up to the overly burdened trial courts that we have. It's shocking, but we have hundreds of thousands of people who are watching the Johnny Depp Amber Heard trial with great alacrity over the last couple of months. That trial has taken literally 6 weeks of a Virginia court's time. Please understand that in our country, we have crores of cases of that sort, which takes that kind of time, if not longer, with less professionalism, with less technological inputs. So we are creaking in this system, and we are fortunate that criminal cases even come to a closure. Our judges are overworked, and our criminal justice system is completely overwhelmed.
So now let's come, as we wrap up this discussion, the moot point of what we're talking about right now. And over the last few days, we've seen a number of cases, right? You've had an arrest of a Delhi health minister, Mr. Satyendra Jain. You've had investigations, charges against various high-profile politicians from the state of Maharashtra, in Karnataka, etc., opposition leaders. Mr. Gopal, are you seeing a trend over here? Because that's what the opposition today is claiming, that these agencies are being used for a witch hunt against opposition parties. Or is it fair to say that all of these people have possibly done something wrong, and that's why now the skeletons are out of the closet?
I'm finding the timing remarkably coincidental, and I think we have to work backwards from that. The kind of people against whom these notices and these cases and these arrests take place, they happen to be prominent members of parties which are aligned against the central government's party. You find kind of coercive actions, and it's not one or two. We found it in many cases. The only thing is, this is a standard political copybook. The Congress used this, the BJP is using this. Every political party which is going to be in power in the center is going to continue using it. So let's not make it a political thing. It's a fact that the central government uses these agencies and times the various steps. Please note, this is not a conviction. This is a notice.
Yes.
In the Jain's case, it's an arrest. These are all small steps along the way. There are many of these instruments that you can use. The only question is, how long are you going to keep using this? Why aren't you just finishing these cases off? You can set up special courts and wrap it up.
Get on with it then. Get on with it. Why these many steps if there is misdeed that has been done? Mr. Neeraj Kumar, your question on the slew of cases that we've been seeing recently, and do you, like Mr. Gopal, think that the timing is circumspect?
I gave you an example of the case I handled in the CBI.
Yes.
I told my bosses that the timing is wrong, but perhaps they were under some kind of pressure to register that case at that point of time because they had to settle scores. So it is a bit of both. It is the timing, if you say that the case against Mr. So-and-so of the Delhi government or Mr. So-and-so of the central government is false or it has no merit, that also may not be true. Or if you say that it is, because of political reasons, that is true as well. Because look at the timing. And the investigating agencies should always, if they can, resist timing the registration and the investigation and the arrest of these cases. But sadly, the impression that a common man on the street gets that whatever has happened for political reasons, and that is most unfortunate.
Absolutely. That is the impression. The credibility of these agencies are shot. And for the politician who has been accused, well, sometimes it works in their favor as a sympathy factor. Sometimes it nails them politically. So either way, depends on how they can spin it. But what about the actual pursuit of truth? That question remains hanging. I want to thank both of you for joining us on the chat today.
Thank you.